This episode is brought to you by Boat Trader, America's largest boating marketplace. Whether you're buying, selling, or upgrading, the Boat Trader app makes it easy. With the biggest selection of new and used boats from dealers and private sellers. Browse, compare, and even apply for financing. All in one place. Download the Boat Trader app and start your search today.
Planning a fishing trip shouldn't feel like a full-time job. With fishingbooker.com, you can find and book the perfect fishing trip within minutes. Fishingbooker.com connects you with trusted fishing captains around the world. Booking is fast, easy, and secure, with access to verified customer reviews, loyalty rewards, and around-the-clock customer support. Everything you need to book with confidence is in one place. So head to fishingbooker.com and start planning your next fishing adventure today.
Welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of castingacross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. Hey, it's episode 399, and that means next week is 400, something special for that one. But episode 401 will be a slightly delayed accusations podcast, which is my way of interacting with listener, reader, and viewer questions, comments, and accusations. So if you've heard something recently that you want me to follow up on, if you have a different take on it, if you've read something recently on the website, if you've watched one of my book review videos or gear profile videos in the last few weeks or months, and you want your perspective shared and answered, then let me know. Matthew at castingacross.com. Matthew at castingacross.com is the email address. There's always a contact form over on the website as well. And I really enjoy those episodes. So what I always say is I record one of those episodes and then I get a flood. That's a bit of hyperbole. I get a lot of emails in the week following that episode because people are like, oh, I could ask a question. Now's the time. Now's the time, because I almost always give preference to ones that come in the weeks immediately preceding those episodes. So again, now is the time. You have an extra week because next week is the 400th episode. Spectacular. That'll be good. All right, today we're talking about fly fishing etiquette. Now, this is something I don't think I've talked about much on the podcast. I know I've made fun of it in the past, just mostly out of jest and with an eye towards just kind of how anglers take themselves too seriously. But this is something important. And if it's something that you are not aware of, you can really, ruin someone else's day. And I'm not saying that to give a pass on people who are a little too intense and aggressive on the river. But as far as it is within your power, be at peace with all men. And so that certainly includes people who are on the river with you. So what I want to do is I want to share some aspects of fly fishing etiquette and then maybe add a little bit of nuance to it. So here's the first one. When you pull up to a spot, if you see somebody else getting ready, you have a few choices. You can either see if you can get ready as fast as you can and then sprint to the water, taking what you assume to be the best hole. Now, there's a chance that where they want to fish is not where you are wanting to fish. But I don't think that this is the letter or the spirit of the fly fishing etiquette law. So let me explain what I think the best way to do this is, because I've been on both sides of this, right? So if you pull up to a relatively remote spot and there's another angler who is there and he's taking his time getting his waders and boots on or rigging up his rod, and you're already rigged up. You've got a rooftop rod rack, or your rod's already assembled in your car. Maybe even you're wearing your waders, or you're just fast. In my opinion, and you can certainly disagree with me, he was still there first. Now, again, if he's setting up a campsite, he is tying a fly, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about who's someone who legitimately looks like they're getting ready to go fishing, fly fishing or otherwise, rushing past them because you are ready before they are. You might say, hey, you snooze, you lose. But I think there's a better way to handle this situation. And it involves having a pleasant conversation. Now, I'm going to throw the caveat in there. If this is a popular parking spot, so I'm thinking of some of the places that I fish up here in New England, places where I fish in upstate New York, places where I fish in the Mid-Atlantic, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, very popular rivers where there's a dozen parking spots. It's a paved parking lot. There's a kiosk there. There's a bench there. There's a portage on there. All those amenities are there. And you pull up and there's one angler, maybe two other anglers that are getting ready. Wherever you want to fish is yours. If they are bent on a ship about that, they should go fish somewhere more remote, or they should get ready faster, okay? So that's not what I'm talking about. I am not talking about pulling up to the very, very popular fishing access point, and you simply were ready faster than the next person. You go fish wherever you want to fish. If it is a remote spot, if it's you and that other person in that pull-off, and you just happen to get ready much faster than them after they've been there, common courtesy is to say, hey, where were you planning on fishing? They may make this a non-issue by saying, oh, I was planning on going downstream. Well, maybe you wanted to fish right where the trailhead or leads, or you might want to fish upstream. Not a problem. And if it's downstream, then you know what? My perspective on this is be the peacemaker and go fish somewhere else. Okay. If they say, oh, I was planning on heading, the X pool. All right. Well, then don't fish the X pool, for goodness sake. Don't fish right below it. Don't fish right above it. You would hopefully, I assume, expect someone to give you that courtesy. And a lot of times that is just going to make a pathway towards, maybe that person saying, you know what, you're ready, go ahead and fish. Or having a conversation. It is just common courtesy. So that's not one we often talk about. But I see it very similar as, someone is slowly making their way to a pool and you rushing past them. All right. I think it's a very similar thing. It may be one step further than you think is necessary, but personally, I've seen that. I have been the one where I have been, tying my shoes or helping somebody get their rod strung up that I'm fishing with, and somebody else zips in the parking lot, hops out, grabs their rod out of the rooftop rack, and then flies to the river. And they're in the prime spot, that everybody is aware is the prime spot. And you know what? It's on me to not get frustrated in that situation, and it's on, I think, that person to maybe be a little bit more considerate. So that is the first fly fishing etiquette thing that I don't think we often talk about, but I think is an important thing, because at the heart of it, it's communication. Just communicate with people. The next one is high-holing somebody or low-holing somebody. What do I mean by that? So high-holing is hopping upstream of somebody and taking that next spot. Now, the problems with this are multifaceted. Generally speaking, you're going to move upstream as you fish. There are, of course, some techniques where you move downstream as you fish. Generally speaking, you move upstream as you fish. Secondly, if you walk into a river of any moderate size, so not a giant river, but a medium-sized river, a small stream, and you walk in upstream, you are either on top of fish that person is working their way towards or casting towards, or you are potentially disturbing the river upstream of the fish that person is fishing for. And you know what? You could argue, hey, I'm sending down nymphs, other macroinvertebrates are being kicked up as I wade, and they should be happy about that. You could say, it's not that much sediment I'm kicking up, whatever. Just don't do it. Don't walk in upstream. Now, again, this is the case that you need to take everything into consideration. So for years and years, and I've talked about this a lot, I lived in Pennsylvania, and a lot of these rivers were very heavily fished. Some of the freestone streams that were close to that I-81 corridor, for example, there was always a lot of people on that water. Now, if you want tranquility and solitude, then you're going to have to be okay with driving a little bit further than that. And that's true other places where I've fished, where I've seen people just get absolutely irate on some of the most popular stretches of water because somebody gets within 100 yards of them. I've heard people yell. I've seen people throw things. I've had people complain to me as I've been walking on the path thinking, I would have actually probably been okay with getting closer to you than that person got. You can't get, again, this is where the etiquette side of things, where it puts the impetus back on the quote unquote victim to see what's happening and not be so offended. Some of these very, very popular rivers, and I've seen this out west too. If you're planning on fishing some of these rivers, you don't get 200 yards upstream of you and 200 yards downstream of you as your water. Okay. I've seen it too, and I know I'm kind of going around the barn a little bit on this, but I think it's important, again, to not have unreasonable expectations. I've seen it before where someone has posted up in a spot, slowly been working upstream, and which is a totally normal thing to do. Then somebody enters downstream of them, they stop or they start moving back downstream almost to say, I want all this spot, for myself. That's not how it works. If you're fishing a spot that I would say, if you're in the middle of nowhere and it's just you and one other person, they happen to put in closer to you than you would like, that is not you don't get licensed to start enforcing the rules the way that you want to enforce them. If they're downstream of you, then all right, they're entering downstream of you. And if they're cool with fishing the fish that you've already fished for, then you've already fished for them. Be okay with that. So that's, again, the mentality of the person who's already in the river. You take your surroundings into consideration as people potentially enter upstream of you. Okay, so if it is a remote stream, if it's a small mountain stream, then yeah, it's not very considerate to pop in 25 yards upstream of somebody, all right, or to take the next pool in a mountain mountain stream. I have had that happen to me before, where I've been fishing relatively remote streams, but there's big trails that run parallel with them, and I'll be fishing and I'll see somebody walk past me, and I go to the next pool and they're right there. Which, at the end of the day, fine. Now I just know I'm going to walk another quarter mile upstream and start fishing there. Now I have confidence that maybe the only other person that's going to fish that creek that day is fishing downstream of me. It would have been nice for them to go further upstream, yes. But again, it is what it is. It's not worth getting into confrontation. I had somebody high hole me and my son. So that's the other thing to take into consideration. I know I'm throwing all these caveats out there because, again, this is a fluid and dynamic thing, right? My son and I were fishing shoulder to shoulder, for all intents and purposes, on a relatively popular stream in Pennsylvania. And I was helping him. At that point, I'd stopped fishing for the day, I think, and I was just helping him get on a few more fish. So I was helping him with his, sighting where his nymph was and making sure everything was set up straight. And there's a lot of fish in this run. And I could see them, and he could see them, and anybody walking by could see them. And somebody entered on the other side of the stream. And the thing is that you could, with a very reasonable roll cast, go line over line. And I just said, hey, would you mind, fishing either upstream or downstream until we're done with this hole? We're almost done. So I made my intentions clear that I'm okay with him fishing there. Just give it a minute potentially. And man, he went off on me. He had you could tell that he had been drinking, I think. However, he just went off on people like me. I'm not sure what people like me are. I mean, I had a son. I had waders on. He had waders on. A fly rod. He had a fly rod. So I'm not sure what his deal was. But he went off. And in that situation, I said, it is not worth these fish to get into a fist fight with somebody who potentially is a little bit compromised cognitively because of some sort of substance. And you know what I did after that is I actually said, hey, I'm sorry if what I said was over the line. I just was trying to get my son on a fish. And you might say, hey, you back down. You should have stood up for your son. In my mind, I think giving that picture to my son of just trying to be a peacemaker was actually more important. And again, this was a relatively small stream, and I knew I was going to see that guy again that day and probably the next day as we were going to fish on it. So it was easier for me to just say, hey, this is what I was trying to do. I'm sorry if I didn't communicate that well. And the guy absolutely got in our hole, but it was just not worth a conflict. So again, we talked a little bit about speed and priority of accessing the stream. When it comes to high-holing somebody, or I would say low-holing somebody, depending on the nature of the watershed, don't do it. But if someone is kind of on the edge of what you feel like is encroaching, take into consideration, first of all, what kind of river you're on. Is it the kind of river where this is going to happen? There's times where you're fishing these heavy hatches on these popular streams, and by the time it's all said and done, you look up from staring at that water in front of you, and there's somebody a cast length downstream and a cast length upstream from you. Same thing is true on some of these, Great Lakes salmon and steelhead fisheries. You can't get bent out of shape. Yeah, it's not great. It's not the best situation in the world, but you got to temper your expectations and not be incendiary on the water. But then also, don't pitch a fit. Don't make things worse. I can say that I've had plenty of times where my anxiety, lowercase a anxiety, over people getting close to me has had an undue negative effect on my experience and probably even on my presentation. You know the kind of focus that it takes. You know the kind of, being laser honed in on what you're doing when you're fishing. And to have that distraction, constantly looking upstream, constantly looking downstream, constantly looking behind you, you know what? You could spend your time doing that, or you could spend your time fishing. And if you really don't want to do anything like that, then go somewhere else. And not everyone is going to conform to your exact standards. And I would say, and again, I might be beating a dead horse here, that a lot of times people that are bothering folks are probably closer to the gray area than into the clear black and white. This is right. This is wrong. All right. So that's two areas of communication, of etiquette. Kind of maintaining that buffer between other people, but also having good expectations, not high-holing, put that in the same category, having conversation with somebody else. And here's I think what would be our last one for today, because we're at 14 and a half minutes already. It is to not freak out about people in watercraft, okay? I've seen this one before where if they're tubing, if they're in a canoe, if they're in a kayak. Now, I know a tuber splashing and kicking over your spot can absolutely put all those fish down. That can definitely happen. I have seen large canoes, 16, 18-foot canoes, go over rising fish and that not bother those fish a bit in incredibly spooky fisheries. I have seen guides, really go out of their way to move their drift boat or to move their raft into incredibly shallow water to avoid wading anglers. So it really runs the gamut. There can be very inconsiderate boaters, and there can be boaters that are just, they don't have any other option. There's a time I was fishing on a mid-Atlantic stream, and it was a big gravel bar for about 30 feet. We're talking between 4 and 8 inches of water, and then there was a deep run for about 10 feet, and that's what comprised this entire stream. And so the boaters had really nowhere else to go, with the exception of getting out and kind of portaging, if you're French, their boat kind of across that gravel bar or up on the bank. In my mind, if somebody was really wanting to go out of their way, then yeah, they could get out and do that. But I saw somebody absolutely lose his mind on a canoe that really did its best to get right up on the bank, just to be as far away as possible, be as considerate as they could be without going over and above. I've also seen people who have tried to cast way further than they'd been casting so that they could tell somebody, you are putting down my fish. What are you doing? Like, people would take 3 or 4 quick steps further out into the current, deeper than they would want to wade, and then bomb out double hauls just simply so they could raise their arms in a shrug of incredulity as somebody floats by in their kayak without paddling to do the best that they can. So again, this is a situation where, yes, people are going to be jerks. It's going to happen. But you don't go out of your way to make this a bigger problem, and don't assume that these fish are going to get absolutely put down. You know what? Give it a rest. Use that opportunity to go to the bathroom. Use that opportunity to, have a sip of water. Use the opportunity to check all your leaders, knots, and make sure there's no wind knots in there. Just make the most of what might be a less than ideal situation. If you happen to be in a watercraft, then consider what other anglers are going to want. And then I would say go one step further. So I certainly have, from time to time, done my best, with paddle to just get as absolutely far away as I can. to move, making sure I'm getting out of that main flow of where that person is fishing. But at the same time, a couple times when I get to stretches where I see 2 or 3 anglers, and I'm thinking, you know what, this is going to be like running the gauntlet, then I'm going to hop out and I'm going to portage. Now, one time this happened where I went on the gravel bar behind where this guy was fishing. And, he gave me an earful that I was floating this river that was, don't you know, for wade fishing, which is, probably one of the dumbest things I've ever heard. And then the next guy said, hey, I really appreciate you getting out and not floating, over those fish. So again, you can't please everyone all the time. But it's about mitigating and minimizing, conflict and also interfering with someone else's fishing. So kind of on this one, as far as other people using the water, are you going to educate the teens that are splashing around in their inner tubes by cussing at them and yelling at them? No. Might you even be able to educate them or sway the way they consider things by having a reasonable, calm conversation? There's a chance that's not going to happen. But at the end of the day, which one are you going to feel better about? Screaming your head off at some teenagers? Or if you feel so convicted and compelled, just at least saying, hey, just so you guys know, with this kind of fishing, that can really make it so that this hole is unfishable for a long time. I know you might not be aware of it, but just FYI. At the end of the day, which approach are you going to be more happy with yourself? You're going home, tell your wife, guess what? I screamed at some kids because they ruined one hole of fishing. Go to the bar, tell everybody, yeah, I screamed at some kids. Or say, you know what? I gave it a good shot. They flipped me the bird. They yelled at me. But what are you going to do? You're going to fist fight with the kids? You're going to pop the inner tube? How's that going to make you feel at the end of the day? So maybe this is a little bit of a different perspective on etiquette than you have heard. But notice I put a lot of the impetus on the quote-unquote victim. The one, when you and I are the ones who are kind of on the end of being imposed upon. And this is why I think this matters. If everyone had that mentality of being a little bit more gracious and being a little more considerate, then we wouldn't be so concerned about what can I get away with? How close can I get to the next person? Where can I fish and not feel like, not let that other person feel like I'm imposing on them? If we all think about others in the way that we hope others think about us, it's almost like there's a rule like this that somebody articulated somewhere in some sort of divine capacity. But if we were to do unto others as we would have them do unto us, then that would go a long way when it comes to fly fishing etiquette, because I think that people do like to push the envelope. And so if we put ourselves in their shoes and just maybe even go out of our way to be a little more considerate and kind, I think the rivers will be nicer, the parking lots will be nicer, the fly shops will be nicer, fly fishing will be nicer. And at the end of the day, if all this stuff really rubs you raw and you absolutely hate it, then go hike deep in the mountains, go somewhere where there's not going to be anybody else to fish. And you know what? You're probably going to find more wild trout and more solitude. You'll definitely find more peace of mind than you will if you're fishing around other people that are potentially going to do what people do, which is cause problems. All right, there you have it. This may be a great opportunity for you to send some feedback, maybe even an accusation. You may think I have it completely wrong, or I missed your favorite bit of fly fishing etiquette. I didn't even talk about the fish, right? I didn't talk about fish handling, didn't talk about anything like that. This is all about person-to-person interaction. So let me know, Matthew@castingacross.com. This week on Casting Across, the first article was called More on Fly Fishing Small Streams, in which I added to a page on Casting Across where there's a bunch of resources on fishing small streams. Hitherto, at this point, it was all articles. Now there are some videos as well as some podcast episodes, which with 399 episodes and counting, it's a lot harder, I think, to search for episodes on the podcast than it is to find articles on the website. So you'll have them right there. You can play them directly from the web browser, or of course you can tap on whatever you tap on and it'll send it to your podcast player. And then of course, same thing with the YouTube videos. And if you're listening to this and you've not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, do that. The content's different, right? I would say that the YouTube content and the podcast content are the most different. I would say the website content is kind of like splitting the difference between the two. So go ahead and subscribe there. Speaking of YouTube, on the Wednesday of this week, I made a video called A Colorful History of Fly Fishing, 1 minute review, in which I give a 1 minute video review of the history of fly fishing in 50 flies by Ian Whitelaw, or Whitlaw. Not sure. I probably could have Googled that before I did it, but Whitelaw is how I said it in the video. It's how I'm going to say it again right now. It's a great little book. It is certainly not academic, but it is a great overview of the history of fly fishing with an eye towards 50 particular flies, using them as kind of the launching pads for explaining great or moderate evolutions in the history of fly fishing. So that's a good book. It's a good book. It is worth reading. This week's recommendation on the podcast is another fly fishing book. And this is one that I will probably make a video on in the near future. I was going to kind of lump it in with a few more different books of fly fishing adjacent fiction. And it is called Blood of the Witness Tree by Jeff Van Zandt. And this is kind of a horror theme, not kind of. It is a horror book, and I've talked about another one called The Fisherman, which I really, really enjoyed, made a video about that. But this is, fly fishing has an aspect of the story. It explores a bunch of different aspects of life and of relationships, and this is part of a greater series of works. But if that is definitely your bag, then you would want to check out Blood of the Witness Tree by Jeff Van Zandt. He is an English professor, so he knows how to use words. I'll put a link to where you can find that book at the this podcast show notes over at castingacross.com. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. Please subscribe to your favorite podcast app and rate the podcast in Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Then head over to castingacross.com for 3 posts a week on the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.